Prologue of the Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Prologue. Clad in his customary black and silver, with raven hair unpowdered and elaborately dressed, diamonds on his fingers and in his cravat, Hugh Tracy Clare Belmanoir, Duke of Andover, sat at the escritoire in the library of his town house, writing. He wore no rouge on his face, the almost unnatural pallor of which seemed designedly enhanced by a patch set beneath his right eye. Brows and lashes were black, the former slanting slightly up at the corners, but his narrow, heavy-lidded eyes were green and strangely piercing. The thin lips curled a little, sneering as one dead white hand travelled to and fro across the paper.
"But it seems that the fair lady has a brother who, finding me enamoured, threw down the gauntlet. I soundly whipped the presumptuous child, and so the affair ends. Now, as you, my dear Frank, also took some interest in the lady, I write you for the express purpose of informing you that at my hands she has received no hurt, nor is not like to. This I in part tell you, that you shall not imagine yourself in honour bound again to call me out, which purpose, and I mistake not, I yesterday read in your eyes. I should be exceeding loath to meet you a second time, when I should consider it my duty to teach you an even severer lesson than before. This I am not wishful of doing for the liking I bear you. So in all friendship, believe me, Frank, your most obedient humble Devil." His Grace of Andover paused, pen held in mid-air. A mocking smile dawned in his eyes, and he wrote again. "In the event of any desire on your part to hazard your luck with my late paramour, permit me to warn you against the phantom brother, who is in very truth a fire-eater, and would wish to make of you as of me one mouthful. I shall hope to see you at the Queensberry rout on Thursday, when you may once more strive to direct mine erring footsteps on to the thorny path of virtue." His Grace read the postscript through with another satisfied sardonic smile. Then he folded the letter, and affixing a wafer peremptorily struck the hand-bell at his side. And the Honourable Frank Fortescue, reading the postscript half an hour later, smiled too, but differently. Also he sighed, and put the letter into the fire. "And so ends another affair. I wonder if you'll go insolently to the very end," he said softly, watching the paper shrivel and flare up. "I would to God you might fall honestly in love, and that the lady might save you from yourself, my poor devil." End of Prologue. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, April 2011. Chapter 1 of The Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Chapter 1 At the Chequers Inn, Fallowfield. Chadber was the name of the host. Florid of countenance, portly of person, and of manner pompous and urbane. Solely within the walls of the Chequers lay his world, that inn having been acquired by his great-grandfathers as far back as the year 1667, when the jovial Stuart king sat on the English throne, and the Hanoverian electors were not yet dreamed of. A Tory was Mr. Chadber to the backbone. None so bitter against the little German as he, and surely none had looked forward more eagerly to the advent of the gallant Charles Edward. If he confined his patriotism to drinking success to Prince Charlie's campaign, who shall blame him? And if, when sundry Whig gentlemen halted at the Chequers on their way to the coast, and calling for a bottle of Rhenish, bade him toss down a glass himself, with a health to his Majesty, again, who shall blame Mr. Chadber for obeying? What was a health one way or another, when you had rendered active service to two of his Stuart Highness's adherents? It was Mr. Chadber's boast, uttered only to his admiring Tory neighbours, that he had, at the risk of his own life, given shelter to two fugitives of the disastrous '45, who had come so far out of their way as quiet Fallowfield.
That no one had set eyes on either of the men was no reason for doubting an honest landlord's word. But no one would have thought of doubting any statement that Mr. Chadber might make. Mine host of the Chequers was a great personage in the town, being able both to read and to write, and having once, when young, travelled as far north as London town, staying there for 10 days, and setting eyes on no less a person than the great Duke of Marlborough himself, when that gentleman was riding along the Strand on his way to St. James's. Also, it was a not to be ignored fact that Mr. Chadber's home brewed ale was far superior to that sold by the landlord of the rival inn at the other end of the village. Altogether he was a most important character, and no one was more aware of his importance than his worthy self.
"Two gentlemen born," whom he protested he could distinguish at a glance. He was almost obsequiously polite, but on clerks and underlings, and men who bore no signs of affluence about their persons, he wasted none of his deference. Thus it was that when a little green-clad lawyer alighted one day from the mail-coach and entered the coffee-room at the Chequers, he was received with pomposity and scarce veiled condescension. He was nervous, it seemed, and more than a little worried. He offended Mr. Chadber at the outset, when he insinuated that he was come to meet a gentleman who might perhaps be rather shabbily clothed, rather short of purse, and even of rather unsavoury repute. Very severely did Mr. Chadber give him to understand that guests of that description were entirely unknown at the Chequers. There was an air of mystery about the lawyer, and it appeared almost as though he were striving to probe mine host. Mr. Chadber bridled a little, and became aloof and haughty. When the lawyer dared openly to ask if he had had any dealings with highwaymen of late, he was very properly and thoroughly affronted. The lawyer became suddenly more at ease. He eyed Mr. Chadber speculatively, holding a pinch of snuff to one thin nostril. "Perhaps you have staying here a certain Sir Anthony Ferndale?" he hazarded. The gentle air of injury fell from Mr. Chadber. Certainly he had, and come only yesterday of purpose to meet his solicitor. The lawyer nodded. "I am he. Be so good as to apprise Sir Anthony of my arrival." Mr. Chadber bowed exceeding low, and implored the lawyer not to remain in the draughty coffee-room. Sir Anthony would never forgive him, and he allowed his solicitor to wait him there. Would he not come to Sir Anthony's private parlour? The very faintest of smiles creased the lawyer's thin face as he walked along the passage in Mr. Chadber's wake. He was ushered into a low-ceilinged, pleasant chamber looking out on to the quiet street, and left alone what time Mr. Chadber went in search of Sir Anthony. The room was panelled and ceilinged in oak, with blue curtains to the windows and blue cushions on the high-backed settle by the fire. A table stood in the centre of the floor, with a white tablecloth thereon, and places laid for two. Another smaller table stood by the fireplace, together with a chair and a stool. The lawyer took silent stock of his surroundings, and reflected grimly on the landlord's sudden change of front. It would appear that Sir Anthony was a gentleman of some standing at the Chequers. Yet the little man was plainly unhappy, and fell to pacing to and fro, his chin sunk low on his breast, and his hands clasped behind his back. He was come to seek the disgraced son of an earl, and he was afraid of what he might find. 6 years ago Lord John Carstairs, eldest son of the Earl of Wyncham, had gone with his brother, the Honourable Richard, to a card party, and had returned a dishonoured man. That Jack Carstairs should cheat was incredible, ridiculous, and at first no one had believed the tale that so quickly spread. But he had confirmed that tale himself, defiantly and without shame, before riding off, bound, men said, for France and the foreign parts. Brother Richard was left, so said the countryside, to marry the lady they were both in love with. Nothing further had been heard of Lord John, and the outraged Earl forbid his name to be mentioned at Wyncham, swearing to disinherit the prodigal. Richard espoused the fair Lady Lavinia, and brought her to live at the great house, strangely forlorn now without Lord John's magnetic presence. But far from being an elated bridegroom, he seemed to have brought gloom with him from the honeymoon, so silent and so unhappy was he. 6 years drifted slowly by without bringing any news of Lord John, and then 2 months ago, journeying from London to Wyncham, Richard's coach
had been waylaid, and by a highwayman who proved to be none other than the scapegrace peer. Richard's feelings may be imagined. Lord John had been singularly unimpressed by anything beyond the humour of the situation. That, however, had struck him most forcibly, and he had burst out into a fit of laughter that had brought a lump into Richard's throat and a fresh ache into his heart. Upon pressure, John had given his brother the address of the inn, in case of accidents, and told him to ask for Sir Anthony Ferndale, if ever he should need him. Then, with one hearty handshake, he had galloped off into the darkness. The lawyer stopped his restless pacing to listen. Down the passage was coming the tap-tap of high heels on the wooden floor, accompanied by a slight rustle as of stiff silks. The little man tugged suddenly at his cravat. Supposing debonair Lord John was no longer debonair? Supposing he dared not suppose anything? Nervously he drew a roll of parchment from his pocket and stood fingering it. A firm hand was laid on the door-handle. Turning it cleanly round, the door opened to admit a veritable apparition, and was closed again with a snap. The lawyer found himself gazing at a slight, rather tall gentleman who swept him a profound bow, gracefully flourishing his smart three-cornered hat with one hand and delicately clasping cane and perfumed handkerchief with the other. He was dressed in the height of the Versailles fashion, with full-skirted coat of palest lilac laced with silver, small clothes and stockings of white, and waistcoat of flowered satin. On his feet he wore shoes with high red heels and silver buckles, while a wig of the latest mode, marvellously powdered and curled, and smacking greatly of Paris, adorned his shapely head. In the foaming lace of his cravat reposed a diamond pin, and on the slim hand, half covered by drooping laces, glowed and flashed a huge emerald. The lawyer stared and stared again, and it was not until a pair of deep blue, rather wistful eyes met his in a quizzical glance that he found his tongue. Then a look of astonishment came into his face, and he took a half-step forward. "Master Jack!" he gasped. "Master Jack!" The elegant gentleman came forward and held up a reproving hand. The patch at the corner of his mouth quivered, and the blue eyes danced. "I perceive that you are not acquainted with me, Mr. Warburton," he said, amusement in his pleasant, slightly drawling voice. "Allow me to present myself. Sir Anthony Ferndale, à vous servir." A gleam of humour appeared in the lawyer's own eyes as he clasped the outstretched hand. "I think you are perhaps not acquainted with yourself, my lord," he remarked drily. Lord John laid his hat and cane on the small table and looked faintly intrigued. "What's your meaning, Mr. Warburton?" "I am come, my lord, to inform you that the Earl your father died a month since." The blue eyes widened, grew of a sudden hard, and narrowed again. "Is that really so? Well, well. Apoplexy, I make no doubt?" The lawyer's lips twitched uncontrollably. "No, Master Jack. My lord died of heart failure." "So you say. Dear me! But will you not be seated, sir? In a moment my servant will have induced the chef to serve dinner. You will honour me, I trust?" The lawyer murmured his thanks and sat down on the settle, watching the other with puzzled eyes. The Earl drew up a chair for himself and stretched his foot to the fire. 6 years, eh? I protest 'tis prodigious good to see your face again, Mr. Warburton. And I'm the Earl and High Toby, by gad!" He laughed softly. "I have the documents here, my lord." Carstairs eyed the roll through his quizzing glass. "I perceive them. Pray, return them to your pocket, Mr. Warburton." "But there are certain legal formalities, my lord." "Exactly. Pray do not let us mention them." "But, sir—" Then the Earl smiled, and his smile was singularly sweet and winning. "At least not until after dinner, Warburton. Instead, you shall tell me how you found me." "Mr. Richard directed me to come here, sir." "Ah, of course. I had forgot that I told him my pied-à-terre when I waylaid him." The lawyer nearly shuddered at this cheerful, barefaced mention of his lordship's disreputable profession. Indeed, sir, Mr. Richard is eager for you to return."
The handsome young face clouded over. My lord shook his head. "Impossible, my dear Warburton. I am convinced Dick never voiced so foolish a suggestion. Come now, confess, 'tis your own fabrication." Warburton ignored the bantering tone and spoke very deliberately. "At all events, my lord, I believe him anxious to make amends." Carstairs shot an alert, suspicious glance at him. "Ah!" "Yes, sir, amends." My lord studied his emerald with half-closed eyelids. "But why amends, Warburton?" he asked. "Is not that the word, sir? I confess it strikes me as inapt. Doubtless I am dull of comprehension." "You were not wont to be, my lord." "No, but 6 years changes a man, Warburton. Pray, is Mr. Carstairs well?" "I believe so, sir," replied the lawyer, frowning at the deft change of subject. "And Lady Lavinia?" "Ay." Mr. Warburton looked searchingly across at him, seeing which my lord's eyes danced afresh, brimful with mischief. "I am very delighted to hear it. Pray present my compliments to Mr. Carstairs, and beg him to use Wyncham as he wills." "Sir! Master Jack, I implore you!" burst from the lawyer, and he sprang up, moving excitedly away, his hands twitching, his face haggard. My lord stiffened in his chair. He watched the other's jerky movements anxiously, but his voice when he spoke was even and cold. "Well, sir?" Mr. Warburton wheeled and came back to the fireplace, looking hungrily down at my lord's impassive countenance. With an effort he seemed to control himself. "Master Jack, I had better tell you what you have already guessed, I know." Up went one haughty eyebrow. "You know what, Warburton?" "That you are innocent." "Of what, Mr. Warburton?" "Of cheating at cards, sir." My lord relaxed, and flicked a speck of dust from his great cuff. "I regret the necessity of having to disillusion you, Mr. Warburton." "My lord, do not fence with me, I beg. You can trust me, surely?" "Certainly, sir." "Then do not keep up this pretence with me, no, nor look so hard neither. I've watched you grow up right from the cradle, and Master Dick too, and I know you both through and through. I know you never cheated at Colonel Dare's, nor anywhere else. I could have sworn it at the time. When I saw Master Dick's face, I knew at once that he it was who had played foul, and you had but taken the blame." "No." "I know better. Can you, Master Jack, look me in the face and truthfully deny what I have said? Can you? Can you?" My lord sat silent. With a sigh, Warburton sank on to the settle once more. He was flushed, and his eyes shone, but he spoke calmly again. "Of course you cannot. I have never known you to lie. You need not fear I shall betray you. I kept silence all these years for my lord's sake, and I will not speak now until you give me leave." "Which I never shall." "Master Jack, think better of it, I beg of you, now that my lord is dead." "It makes no difference." "No difference? 'Twas not for his sake? 'Twas not because you knew how he loved Master Dick?" "No." "Then 'tis Lady Lavinia?" "No." "But—" My lord smiled sadly. "Ah, Warburton, and you averred you knew us through and through. For whose sake should it be but his own?" "I feared it." The lawyer made a hopeless gesture with his hands. "You will not come back?" "No, Warburton, I will not. Dick may manage my estates. I remain on the road." Warburton made one last effort. "My lord," he cried despairingly, "will you not at least think of the disgrace to the name an you be caught?" The shadows vanished from my lord's eyes. "Mr. Warburton, I protest you are of a morbid turn of mind. Do you know, I had not thought of so unpleasant a contingency. I swear I was not born to be hanged." The lawyer would have said more, had not the entrance of a servant carrying a loaded tray put an end to all private conversation. The man placed dishes upon the table, lighted candles, and arranged 2 chairs. "Dinner is served, sir," he said. My lord nodded and made a slight gesture toward the windows. Instantly the man went over to them and threw the heavy curtains across. My lord turned to Mr. Warburton. What say you, sir? Shall we be Burgundy or claret, or do you prefer sack?" Warburton decided in favour of claret. "Claret, Jim," ordered Carstairs, and rose to his feet. "I trust the drive has whetted your appetite, Warburton, for honest Chadber will be monstrous hurt an you do not justice to his capons." "I shall endeavour to spare his feelings," replied the lawyer with a twinkle, and seated himself at the table. Whatever might be Mr. Chadber's failings, he possessed an excellent cook. Mr. Warburton dined very well, beginning on a fat duck and continuing through the main courses that constituted the meal. When the table was cleared, the servant gone, and the port before them, he endeavoured to guide the conversation back into the previous channels. But he reckoned without my lord, and presently found himself discussing the Pretender's late rebellion. He sat up suddenly. "There were rumours that you were with the Prince, sir?" Carstairs set down his glass in genuine amazement. "I? Indeed, yes, sir. I do not know whence the rumour came, but it reached Wyncham. My lord said not, but I think Mr. Richard hardly credited it." "I should hope not. Why should they think me turned rebel, pray?" Mr. Warburton frowned. "Rebel, sir?" "Rebel, Mr. Warburton. I have served under his Majesty." "The Carstairs were ever Tories, Master Jack, true to their rightful king." "My dear Warburton, I owe nought to the Stuart princes. I was born in King George the First's reign, and I protest I am a good Whig." Warburton shook his head disapprovingly. "There has never been a Whig in the Wyncham family, sir." "And you hope there never will be again, eh? What of Dick? Is he faithful to the Pretender?" "I think Mr. Richard does not interest himself in politics, sir." Carstairs raised his eyebrows, and there fell a silence. After a minute or two Mr. Warburton cleared his throat. I suppose, sir, you have no idea of discontinuing your profession?" My lord gave an irrepressible little laugh. "Faith, Mr. Warburton, I've only just begun." "Only but a year ago, Mr. Richard, I held him up. Ay, but to tell the truth, sir, I've not done much since then." "Then, sir, you are not notorious?" "Good gad, no! Notorious, forsooth! Confess, Warburton, you thought me some heroic figure. Gentleman Harry, perhaps?" Warburton blushed. "Well, sir, I wondered." "I shall have to disappoint you, I perceive. I doubt Bow Street has never heard of me, and to tell the truth, 'tis not an occupation which appeals vastly to my senses." "Then why, my lord, do you continue?" "I must have some excuse for roaming the country," pleaded Jack. "I could not be idle." "You are not compelled to rob, my lord?" Carstairs wrinkled his brow inquiringly. "Compelled? Ah, I take your meaning. No, Warburton, I have enough for my wants now. Time was, but that is past. I rob for amusement's sake." Warburton looked steadily across at him. "I am surprised, my lord, that you, a Carstairs, should find it amusing." John was silent for a moment, and when he at length spoke, it was defiantly and with a bitterness most unusual in him. "The world, Mr. Warburton, has not treated me so kindly that I should feel any qualms of conscience. But if it gives you any satisfaction to know it, I will tell you that my robberies are few and far between. You spoke a little while ago of my probable au fait on Tyburn Tree. I think you need not fear to hear of that." It gives me great satisfaction, my lord, I confess," stammered the lawyer, and found nothing more to say. After a long pause he again produced the bulky roll of parchment and laid it down before the Earl with the apologetic murmur of "Business, my lord." Carstairs descended from the clouds and eyed the packet with evident distaste. He proceeded to fill his and his companion's glass very leisurely. That done, he heaved a lugubrious sigh, caught Mr. Warburton's eye, laughed in answer to its quizzical gleam, and broke the seal. "Since you will have it, sir, business." Mr. Warburton stayed the night at the Chequers and travelled back to Wyncham next day by the 2 o'clock coach. He played piquet and écarté with my lord all the evening, and then retired to bed, not having found an opportunity to argue his mission as he had hoped to do. Whenever he had tried to turn the conversation that way, he had been gently but firmly led into safer channels, and somehow had found it impossible to get back.
My lord was the gayest and most charming of companions, but talk business he would not. He regaled the lawyer with spicy anecdotes and tales of abroad, but never once allowed Mr. Warburton to speak of his home or of his brother. The lawyer retired to rest in a measure reassured by the other's good spirits, but at the same time dispirited by his failure to induce Carstairs to return to Wyncham. Next morning, although he was not up until 12, he was before my lord, who only appeared in time for lunch, which was served as before in the oak parlour. He entered the room in his usual leisurely yet decided fashion, and made Mr. Warburton a marvellous leg. Then he bore him off to inspect his mare Jenny, of whom he was inordinately proud. By the time they returned to the parlour, luncheon was served, and Mr. Warburton realised that he had scarcely time left in which to plead his cause. My lord's servant hovered continually about the room, waiting on them, until his master bade him go to attend to the lawyer's valise. When the door had closed on his retreating form, Carstairs leaned back in his chair, with a rather dreary little smile, turned to his companion. "You want to reason with me, I know, Mr. Warburton, and indeed I will listen, and I must, but I would so much rather that you left the subject alone, believe me." Warburton sensed the finality in his voice, and wisely threw away at his last chance. "I understand 'tis painful, my lord, and I will say no more. Only remember, and think on it, I beg." The concern in his face touched my lord. "You are too good to me, Mr. Warburton, I vow. I can only say that I appreciate your kindness and your forbearance, and I trust that you will forgive my seeming churlishness, and believe that I am indeed grateful to you." "I wish I might do more for you, Master Jack," stammered Warburton, made miserable by the wistful note in his favourite's voice. There was no time for more. The coach already awaited him, and his valise had been hoisted up. As they stood together in the porch, he could only grip my lord's hand tightly and say good-bye. Then he got hurriedly into the coach, and the door was slammed behind him. My lord made his leg, and watched the heavy vehicle move forward and roll away down the street. Then, with a stifled sigh, he turned and walked towards the stables. His servant saw him coming, and went at once to greet him. "The mare, sir?" "As you say, Jim. The mare, in an hour." He turned, and would have strolled back. "Sir, your honour—" He paused, looking over his shoulder. "Well?" "They're on the look-out, sir. Best be careful." "They always are, Jim. But thanks." Ye wouldn't take me with ye, sir?" pleadingly. "Take you? Faith, no. I've no mind to lead you into danger, and you serve me best by remaining to carry out my orders." The man fell back. "Ay, sir, but—" "There are none, Jim." "No, sir. But ye will have a care." "I will be the most cautious of men." He walked away on the word, and passed into the house. In an hour he was a very different being. Gone was the emerald ring, the foppish cane. The languid air, too, had disappeared, leaving him brisk and business-like. He was dressed for riding, with buff coat and buckskin breeches and shining top boots. A sober brown wig replaced the powdered creation, and a black tricorn was set rakishly atop. He stood in the deserted porch, watching Jim strap his baggage to the saddle, occasionally giving a curt direction. Presently Mr. Chadber appeared with the stirrup cup, which he drained and handed back with a word of thanks and a guinea at the bottom. Some one called lustily from within, and the landlord, bowing very low, murmured apologies and vanished. Jim cast a last glance at the saddle girths, and leaving the mare quietly standing in the road, came up to his master with gloves and whip. Carstairs took them silently, and fell to tapping his boot, his eyes thoughtfully on the man's face. "You will hire a coach as usual," he said at length, "and take my baggage to—" He paused, frowning. "Lewes. You will engage a room at the White Hart, and order dinner. I shall wear apricot and— "Blue, sir?" ventured Jim, with an idea of being helpful. His master's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You are a humorous sorter. Apricot and cream. Cream? Yes, 'tis a pleasing thought. Cream. That is all. Jenny." The mare turned her head, whinnying as he came towards her. "Good lass!" He mounted lightly, and patted her glossy neck. Then he leaned sideways in the saddle to speak again to Salter, who stood beside him, one hand on the bridle. "The cloak?"
"Behind you, sir." "My wig?" "Yes, sir." "Pistols?" "Ready primed, sir." "I shall be in Lewes in time for dinner, with luck." "Yes, sir." Ye will have a care?" Anxiously. "Have I not told you?" He straightened in the saddle, touched the mare with his heel, and bestowing a quick smile and a nod on his man, trotted easily away. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, May 2011. Chapter 2 of The Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Chapter 2. My Lord at the White Hart. Sir Anthony Ferndale sat before the dressing-table in his room at the White Hart, idly polishing his nails. A gorgeous silk dressing-gown lay over the back of his chair, and behind him Jim was attending to his wig, at the same time hovering anxiously over the coat and waistcoat that were waiting to be donned. Carstairs left off polishing his nails, yawned, and leaned back in his chair, a slim, graceful figure in cambric shirt and apricot satin breeches. He studied his cravat for some moments in the mirror, and lifted a hand to it. Salter held his breath. With extreme deliberation the hand moved a diamond and emerald pin in the fraction of an inch to one side, and fell to his side again. Salter drew a relieved breath, which brought his master's eyes round to himself. "No trouble, Jim?" "None at all, sir." "Neither had I. 'Twas most surprisingly easy. The birds had no more fight in them than sparrows. 2 men in a coach, one a bullying rascal of a merchant, the other his clerk. Gad, but I was sorry for that little man." He paused, his hand on the rouge pot. Salter looked an inquiry. "Yes," nodded Carstairs. "Very sorry. The fat man would appear to bully and browbeat him after the manner of his kind. He even blamed him for my advent, the greasy coward. Yes, Jim, you are right. He did not appeal to me. C'est infadbi." "So?" ingeniously. "I relieved him of his cash-box and 200 guineas. A present for the poor of Lewes." Jim jerked his shoulder, frowning. "If you give away all you get, sir, why do you rob at all?" he asked bluntly. His whimsical little smile played about my lord's mouth. "'Tis an object for my life, Jim, a noble object, and I believe it amuses me to play Robin Hood. Take from the rich to give to the poor," he added, for Salter's benefit. "But to return to my victims. You would have laughed had you but seen my little man come tumbling out of the coach when I opened the door." "Tumble, sir? Why should he do that?" He was at pains to explain the reason. It seems he had been commanded to hold the door to prevent my entering, so when I jerked it open, sooner than loose his hold, he fell out on to the road. Of course I apologised most abjectly, and we had some conversation. Quite a nice little man. It made me laugh to see him sprawling on the road, though. Wish I could have seen it, your honour. I would have liked fine to have been beside ye." He looked down at the lithe form with some pride. "I'd give something to see ye hold up a coach, sir." Hare's foot in hand, Jack met his admiring eyes in the glass and laughed. "I make no doubt you would. I have cultivated a superb voice, a trifle thick and beery, a little loud perhaps. Ah, something to dream of at nights. I doubt they do too," he added reflectively, and affixed the patch at the corner of his mouth. "So? A little low, you think? But 'twill suffice. What's toward?" Down below in the street there was a great stirring and bustling, horses' hoofs, shouts from the ostlers, and the sound of wheels on the cobblestones. Jim went to the window and looked down, craning his neck to see over the balcony. "'Tis a coach arrived, sir." "That much I had gathered," replied my lord, busy with the powder. "Yes, sir." "Oh, Lord, sir!" He was shaken with laughter. "What now?" "'Tis the curiousest sight, sir. 2 gentlemen, one fat and t'other small. One's all shrivelled, looking like a spider. What t'other? Resembles a hippopotamus, particularly in the face?" "Well, yes, sir, he do rather, and he be wearing purple." "Heavens, yes! Purple and an orange waistcoat." Jim peered afresh. "So it is, sir. But how did ye know?" Even as he put the question, understanding flashed into Jim's eyes. "I rather think that I had the honour of meeting these gentlemen," replied my lord placidly. "My buckle, Jim. It's a prodigious great coach with wheels picked out in yellow." "Ay, your honour. The gentlemen seem a bit put out too." "That is quite probable. Does the smaller gentleman wear somewhat muddied garments?" "I can't see, sir. He stands behind the fat gentleman." "Mr. Bumblebee." "Jim!" "Sir?" Jim turned quickly at the sound of a sharp voice. He found that my lord had risen and was holding up a waistcoat of pea-green pattern on a bilious yellow ground, between a disgusted finger and thumb. Before his severe frown, Jim dropped his eyes and stood looking for all the world like a schoolboy detected in some crime. "You put this monstrosity out for me to wear?" in awful tones. Jim eyed the waistcoat gloomily and nodded. "Yes, sir." "Did I not specify cream ground?" "Yes, sir. I thought that 'twas cream." "My good friend, it is I cannot say what it is. And pea-green." He shuddered. "Remove it." Jim hurried forward and disposed of the offending garment. "And bring me the broidered satin. Yes, that is it. It is particularly pleasing to the eye." "Yes, sir," agreed the abashed Jim. "You are excused this time," added my lord, with a twinkle in his eye. "What are our two friends doing?" Salter went back to the window. "They've gone into the house, sir. No, here's the spider gentleman. He do seem in a hurry, your honour." "Ah!" murmured his lordship. "You may assist me into this coat." "Thanks." With no little difficulty my lord managed to enter into the fine satin garment, which when on seemed moulded to his back, so excellently did it fit. He shook out his ruffles and slipped the emerald ring on to his finger with a slight frown. "I believe I shall remain here some few days," he remarked presently, "to allay suspicion." He looked across at his man as he spoke, through his lashes. It was not in Jim's nature to inquire into his master's affairs, much less to be surprised at anything he might do or say. He was content to receive and promptly execute his orders, and to worship Carstairs with a dog-like devotion, following blindly in his wake, happy as long as he might serve him. Carstairs had found him in France, very down upon his luck, having been discharged from the service of his late master owing to the penniless condition of that gentleman's pocket. He had engaged him as his own personal servant, and the man had remained with him ever since, proving an invaluable acquisition to my Lord John. Despite a singularly wooden countenance, he was by no means a fool, and he had helped Carstairs out of more than one tight corner during his inglorious and foolhardy career as highwayman. He probably understood his somewhat erratic master better than anyone else, and he now divined what was in his mind. He returned that glance with a significant wink. "'Twas them gentlemen ye held up to-day, sir?" he asked, jerking an expressive thumb towards the window. Mr. Bumblebee and friend. It would almost appear so. I think I do not fully appreciate Mr. Bumblebee. I find his conduct rather tiresome, but it is just possible that he thinks the same of me. I will further my acquaintance with him." Jim grunted scornfully, and an inquiring eye was cocked at him. "You do not admire our friend? Pray do not judge him by his exterior. He may possess a beautiful mind, but I do not think so. No, I really do not think so." He chuckled a little. "Do you know, Jim, I believe I am going to enjoy myself to-night." "I don't doubt it, your honour. 'Twere child's play to trick the fat gentleman." "Probably, but it is not with the fat gentleman that I shall have to deal. 'Tis with all the officials of this charming town, and I mistake not. Do I hear the small spider returning?" Salter stepped back to the window. "Ay, sir, with 3 others." "Precisely. Be so good as to hand me my snuff-box and my cane. Thank you. I feel that the time is now come for me to put in an appearance. Pray bear in mind that I am new come from France, and journey by easy stages to London, and cultivate a stupid expression." "Yes, that will do excellently." Jim grinned delightedly. He had assumed no expression of stupidity, and was consequently much pleased with this pleasantry. He swung open the door with an air, and watched Sir Anthony mince along the passage to the stairs. In the coffee-room, the city merchant, Mr. Fudby by name, was relating the story of his wrongs, with many an impressive pause and much emphasis, to the mayor, town clerk, and beadle of Lewes. All three had been fetched by Mr. Chilter, his clerk, in obedience to his orders, for the bigger the audience, the better pleased was Mr. Fudby. He was now enjoying himself quite considerably, despite the loss of his precious cash-box. So was not Mr. Hedges the mayor. He was a fussy little man who suffered from dyspepsia. He was not interested in the affair, and he did not see what was to be done for Mr. Fudby. Further, he had been haled from his dinner, and he was hungry, and above all, he found Mr. Fudby very unattractive. Still, a high-road robbery was serious matter enough, and some course of action must be thought out. So he listened to the story with an assumption of interest, looking exceedingly wise, and at the proper moments uttering sounds betokening concern. The more he saw and heard of Mr. Fudby, the less he liked him. Neither did the town clerk care for him. There was that about Mr. Fudby that did not endear him to his fellow-men, especially when they chanced to be his inferiors in the social scale. The beadle did not think much about anything, having decided, and rightly, that the affair had nothing whatever to do with him. He leaned back in his chair and stared stolidly up at the ceiling. The tale Mr. Fudby was telling bore surprisingly little resemblance to the truth. It was a much embellished version, in which he himself had behaved with quite remarkable gallantry. It had been gradually concocted during the journey to Lewes. He was still holding forth when my lord entered the room. Carstairs raised his glass languidly to survey the assembled company, bowed slightly, and walked over to the fire. He seated himself in an armchair, and took no further notice of anybody. Mr. Hedges had recognised at a glance that here was some grand signor, and wished that Mr. Fudby would not speak in so loud a voice. But that individual, delighted at having a new auditor, continued his tale with much relish and in a still louder tone. My lord yawned delicately and took a pinch of snuff.
"Yes, yes," fussed Mr. Hedges, "but short of sending to London for the runners, I do not see what I can do. If I send to London, it must, of course, be at your expense, sir."
Mr. Fudby bristled. "At my expense, sir? Do you say at my expense? I am surprised. I repeat, I am surprised." "Indeed, sir? I can order the town crier out, describing the horse, and offering a reward for the capture of any man on such an animal, but—" He shrugged, and looked across at the town clerk. "I do not imagine that would be of much use, eh, Mr. Brand?" The clerk pursed his lips and spread out his hands. "I fear not. I fear very much not. I would advise Mr. Fudby to have a proclamation posted up round the country." He sat back with the air of one who has contributed his share to the work, and does not intend to offer any more help. "Ho!" growled Mr. Fudby. He blew out his cheeks. "'Twill be a grievous expense, though I suppose it must be done. I cannot but feel that if it had not been for your deplorably coward conduct, Chilter, yes, cowardly conduct, I say, I might never have been robbed of my 200. He snuffled a little, and eyed the flushed but silent Chilter with mingled reproach and scorn. "However, my coachman assures me he could swear to the horse again, although he cannot remember much about the man himself. Chilter, how did he describe the horse?" "Oh, chestnut, Mr. Fudby, chestnut, with a half moon of white on its forehead, and one white foreleg."
Jack perceived that it was time he took a hand in the game. He half turned in his chair and levelled his quizzing glass at Mr. Chilter. "I beg your pardon," he drawled. Mr. Fudby's eyes brightened. The fine gentleman was roused to an expression of interest at last. He launched forth into his story once more for my lord's benefit. Carstairs eyed him coldly, seeing which Mr. Hedges came hurriedly to the rescue.
Yes, Mr. Fudby, quite so. Your pardon, sir, I've not the honour of knowing your name."
"Ferndale," supplied Jack. "Sir Anthony Ferndale."
Yes."
Mr. Hedges bowed.
"Pray pardon my importuning you with
"Not at all," said my lord.
No, quite so. The fact is, these gentlemen have had the misfortune to be waylaid on their journey here."
Sir Anthony's glass was again levelled at the group. His expression betokened mild surprise. "All these gentlemen?" he inquired blandly.
"Oh, no, sir, not all, only Mr. Fudby,"
said that worthy, and discovered that Sir Anthony was bowing frigidly. At once he rose, and resting his knuckles on the table before him, bent his body slowly and painfully. Sir Anthony inclined his head, whereupon, to the delight of all the rest, Mr. Fudby bowed again with even greater stateliness than before. Mr. Hedges observed Sir Anthony's lips to twitch convulsively. He waited for Mr. Fudby to subside, and then continued.
"Yes, Mr. Fudby and Mr.
"My clerk!" snapped Fudby. Sir Anthony favoured Mr. Chilter with his peculiarly sweet smile, and turned again to Mr. Hedges. "I see. A daylight robbery, you say?" "Broad daylight," boomed Mr. Fudby.
Yes,"
interposed the mayor, fearing a fresh outbreak from that quarter. "I wonder if you have seen anything of such an animal as Mr. Chilter describes?" "'Tis a most extraordinary thing," said Carstairs slowly, "but I have just bought such an one." He glanced round with an inquiring smile and one eyebrow lifted.
"Well!"
ejaculated Mr. Fudby. "Well!"
"Dear me, sir, what a strange coincidence! May I ask where you bought it, and from whom?"
"She has not been in my possession over 2 hours. I bought her from an out-at-elbows ruffian on my way hither. I thought at one time that 'twas strange that the man should possess such a mare, pure bred, I vow, and I wondered why he was so eager to be rid of her." "He was eager because he knew he would be recognised by her," explained Mr. Fudby kindly. "Without doubt. Perhaps you would like to see her? I will send my man."
"Oh, no," cried the mayor. "We would not dream of so inconveniencing you."
"'Twere a pleasure," bowed Jack, devoutly hoping that Mr. Fudby would not require to see Jenny, who he felt sure would betray him by her very evident affection.
No, Sir Anthony, 'tis quite unnecessary, I assure you. But I thank you for all that. Mr. Fudby, if you would describe the man himself, I will see to the proclamation."
"Describe him, Chilter," ordered Mr. Fudby, who was becoming rather grumpy. Mr. Chilter smiled suddenly. "Certainly, sir," he said with alacrity. "'Twas a great ruffianly fellow, monstrously tall."
"How tall?"
interrupted the town clerk.
6 feet?"
"Oh, quite," lied Mr. Chilter. "And fat." Jack's shoulders shook. "Fat, you say?" he asked gently. "Very fat," affirmed Mr. Chilter. "And prodigious rough, swearing dreadfully in his speech." "You could not see his face, I suppose?" Mr. Chilter hesitated. "I could see his mouth and chin," he said, "and I remarked a long scar running from his underlip to the bottom of his face." Involuntarily Carstairs' hand caressed his perfectly smooth chin. Either the little clerk was a born romancer, or for some reason or other he did not want the highwayman to be taken.
"Well, Sir Anthony," the mayor was saying, "does that description fit your man?"
My lord frowned thoughtfully. "Tall," he said slowly.
And fat. You said fat, I think, Mr. Chilter?" Rather anxiously, Mr. Chilter reiterated this statement. "Ah, and with a long scar. Yes, that is undoubtedly he. Furthermore," he added audaciously, "he has a squint in his left eye. 'Tis a most ill-favoured rogue and all." "It would appear so, Sir Anthony," remarked the mayor drily. He did not in the least believe the story of the squint, and imagined that the fine court gentleman was amusing himself at their expense. Nevertheless, he had no intention of remonstrating. The sooner he could withdraw from this very tiresome affair the better. So he gravely took down all the absurd particulars, remarked that the man should be easy to find, and made ready to depart. The town clerk rose and tapped the beadle on the shoulder, whereupon that worthy, with a grunt, abandoned his pose of masterly inactivity, and followed the mayor out of the room. Mr. Fudby rose. "I doubt I shall never see my money again," he said pettishly, "if you, Chilter, had not been so—" "Allow me to offer you some snuff, Mr. Chilter," interposed my lord gently, extending his jewelled box. "Doubtless, sir, you would wish to see my mare?"
"I know not of horses," snorted Mr. Fudby. "'Tis my clerk who appears to have remarked all the details," he sneered terrifically.
"Then pray do me the honour of walking as far as the stables, Mr. Chilter. 'Twere as well to be certain about the mare. Fudby, your servant." "And now, Mr. Chilter, I have a grudge against you," said Carstairs, as they walked across the little garden.
"Me, sir?"
"Oh, have you, Sir Anthony?" He looked up, and perceived that the gentleman was laughing. "Yes, Mr. Chilter, a very serious grudge. You have described me as fat." Chilter nearly fainted.
"You, sir?"
he gasped, and stared in amazement. "Also that I swear dreadfully in my speech, and that I have a scar running from my mouth to my chin." Mr. Chilter stood stock still in the middle of the path.
"It was you, sir, all the time? You held us up? Were you the man who wrenched open the door?"
"I was that infamous scoundrel. I begged leave once more to apologise for my carelessness in opening that same door. Now tell me, why did you take such pains to throw dust in their sleepy eyes?" They resumed their walk slowly. The little clerk flushed.
"I scarce know, sir,
"Save that I liked you, and I see. 'Twas prodigious good of you, Mr. Chilter. I wonder if there is anything that I can do to show my gratitude?" Again the clerk flushed, and lifted his head proudly.
"I thank you, sir, but there is not."
By now they had reached the stable. Carstairs opened the door and they entered. "Then will you accept this in token of my regard, sir?" Mr. Chilter gazed at the emerald ring that glowed and winked at him from the palm of my lord's hand. He looked up into the blue eyes and stammered a little. "Indeed, sir, I 'Tis honestly come by," pleadingly. "Come, Mr. Chilter, you'll not hurt my feelings by refusing? You will keep it in remembrance of a fat man, Mr. Chilter, who rudely jerked you onto the road." The clerk took it with unsteady fingers. "I thank you most— Nay, I beg of you, 'tis I thank you for aiding me so kindly. Come and see my Jenny." "Well, lass?" For the mare, at the first sound of his voice, had turned in her loose box, and was whinnying and pawing the ground eagerly. "I do not understand, sir, anything. How it is that you are a highwayman, or why you have honoured me with your confidence. Why you should trust me, but thank you." As he spoke, Mr. Chilter placed his hand in my lord's, and for the second time in his life felt the pressure of those firm, kindly fingers.
"Why, your honour, you've lost your emerald!"
"No, Jim, I gave it away."
Ye gave it away, sir?"
To the small spider. But and he called me fat, too." "Called you fat, sir?" asked the man, bewildered. "Yes, very fat. By the way, let me tell you that I bought Jenny at Fittering to-day from the naughty ruffian who waylaid Mr. Bumblebee." He proceeded to give Jim a sketch of what had transpired below,
When he had finished, the man shook his head severely.
"I doubt you'll never learn wisdom, sir," he scolded.
"I? What have I done? What did ye want to tell it all to the Spider-Man for, sir? 'Twas most incautious of ye. Like as not he'll split to the fat gentleman, and we'll have the whole town at our heels." "Which just shows all you know of the small spider," replied his master calmly. "Hand me the powder." Chapter 2. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, May 2011. Of the Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Chapter 3. Introducing the Honourable Richard Carstairs. Wyncham, a stately old house with mullioned windows, standing high on its stone terraces, half covered by creepers. A house surrounded by lawns, rolling down on the one side to a river that rippled and murmured its way along beneath overhanging trees and a blue sky, over boulders and rocks so clear and sparkling that the myriad pebbles could be seen deep down on its bed. In the other direction the velvet lawns stretched away till they met the orchards and the quiet meadowland. On two sides the house had its terraces, very white in the sunshine, with stone steps leading down to a miniature lake, where water lilies grew, and where the tiny fish darted to and fro unconcernedly. Flagged walks there were, running between flower beds a riot of colour, and solemn old trees that had stood there through all the years. Cool woodland lay beyond the little river, carpeted with dark moss, where in spring the primroses grew. So thick was the foliage of the trees that the sun but penetrated in uneven patches. Up the terrace walls crept roses, yellow and red, pink and white, and tossed their trailing sprays across the parapet. Over the walls of the house they climbed, mingling with purple clematis, jasmine, and sickly honeysuckle. The air was heavy with their united perfumes, while wafted from a bed below came the smoky scent of lavender. The old house seemed half asleep, basking in the sunlight. Save for a peacock preening its feathers on the terrace steps, there was no sign of life. The old place had harboured generations of Carstairs. Earl had succeeded Earl and reigned supreme, and it was only now that there was no Earl living there. No one knew where he was. Scarce a month ago one died, but the eldest son was not there to take his place. For 6 years he had been absent, and none dared breathe his name, for he disgraced that name, and the old Earl cast him off and forbid all mention of him. But the poor folk of the countryside remembered him. They would tell one another tales of his reckless courage, his sweet smile and his winning ways, his light-heartedness and his never-failing kindness and good humour. What a rider he was! To see him sit a horse! What a swordsman! Do you mind the time he fought young Mr. Welsh over yonder in the spinney, with half the countryside watching? Ah, he was a one, was Master Jack! Do you mind how he knocked the sword clean out of Mr. Welsh's hand, and then stood waiting for him to pick it up? And do you mind the way his eyes sparkled, and how he laughed, just for the sheer joy of living? Endless anecdotes would they tell, and the old gaffers would shake their heads and sigh, and long for the sight of him again, and they would jerk their thumbs towards the manor, and shrug their old shoulders significantly. Who wanted Mr. Richard for squire? Not they, at least. They knew he was a good squire, and a kindly man, but give them Master John, who would laugh and crack a joke, and never wear the glum looks that Mr. Richard affected. In the house, Richard Carstairs paced to and fro in his library, every now and again pausing to glance wretchedly up at the portrait of his brother hanging over his desk. The artist had managed to catch the expression of those blue eyes, and they smiled down at Richard in just the way that John was always wont to smile, so gaily, and withal so wistfully. Richard was 29, but already he looked twice his age. He was very thin, and there were deep lines on his good-looking countenance. His grey eyes wore a haunted, careworn look, and his mouth, though well-shaped, was curiously lacking in determination. He was dressed soberly, and without that touch of smartness that had characterised him 6 years ago. He wore black in memory of his father, and it may have been that severity, only relieved by the lace at his throat, that made his face appear so prematurely aged. There was none of his brother's boyishness about him. Even his smile seemed forced and tired, and his laughter rarely held merriment. He pulled out his chronometer, comparing it with the clock on the mantelpiece. His pacing took him to the door, and almost nervously he pulled it open, listening. No sound came to his ears. Back again, to and fro, across the room, eagerly awaiting the clanging of a bell. It did not come. But presently a footfall sounded on the passage without, and someone knocked at the door. In 2 strides Richard was by it, and had flung it wide. Warburton stood there. Richard caught his hand. "Warburton, at last! I've been waiting this hour and more." Mr. Warburton disengaged himself, bowing. "I regret I was not able to come before, sir," he said primly. "I make no doubt you travelled back as quickly as possible. Come in, sir." He led the lawyer into the room and shut the door. "Sit down, Warburton, sit down. You found my brother?" Again Warburton bowed. "I had the felicity of seeing his lordship, sir." "He was well? In good spirits? You thought him changed, yes? Aged, perhaps, or—" "His lordship was not greatly changed, sir." Richard almost stamped in his impatience. "Come, Warburton, come. Tell me everything. What did he say? Will he take the revenues? Will he—" "His lordship, sir, was reluctant to take anything, but upon maturer consideration he consented to accept his elder son's portion. The revenues of the estate he begs you will make use of." "Ah, but you told him that I would touch naught belonging to him." "I tried to persuade his lordship, sir, to no avail. He desires you to use Wyncham as you will." "I'll not touch his money." Warburton gave the faintest of shrugs. "That is as you please, sir." Something in the suave voice made Richard, from his stand by the desk, glance sharply down at the lawyer. Suspicion flashed in his eyes. He seemed about to speak, when Warburton continued. "I believe I may set your mind at rest on one score, Mr. Carstairs. His lordship's situation is tolerably comfortable. He has ample means." But he lives by robbery." Warburton's thin lips curled a little. "Does he not?" persisted Carstairs. "So he would have us believe, sir." "'Tis true. He waylaid me." "And robbed you, sir?" "Rob me? He could not rob his own brother, Warburton." "Your pardon, Mr. Carstairs. You are right. His lordship could not rob a brother, yet have I known a man do such a thing." For a long minute there was no word spoken. The suspicion that had dwelt latent in Carstairs' eyes sprang up again. Some of the colour drained from his cheeks, and twice he passed his tongue between his lips. The fingers of his hand, gripping a chair-back, opened and shut spasmodically. Rather feverishly his eyes searched the lawyer's face, questioning. "John told you? Told you?" He started and floundered hopelessly. "His lordship told me nothing, sir. He was singularly reticent, but there was nothing he could tell me that I did not already know." "What do you mean, Warburton? Why do you look at me like that? Why do you fence with me? In plain words, what do you mean?" Warburton rose, clenching his fists. "I know you, Master Richard, for what you are." "Ah!" Carstairs flung out his hand as if to ward off a blow. Another tense silence. With a great effort Warburton controlled himself, and once more the mask of impassivity seemed to descend upon him. After that one tortured cry, Richard became calm again. He sat down, on his face a look almost of relief, coming after a great strain. "You learnt the truth from John? He will expose me?" "No, sir. I have not learnt it from him, and he will never expose you." Richard turned his head. His eyes, filled now with a species of dull pain, looked full into Warburton's. "Oh?" he said. "Then you—"
"Nor I, sir. I have pledged my word to his lordship I would not speak all these years for your father's sake. Now it is for his." He choked. "You are fond of John?" Still the apathetic, weary voice. "Fond of him? Good God, Master Dick, I love him!" "And I," said Richard very low. He received no reply, and looked up. "You don't believe me?" "Once, sir, I was certain of it. Now—" He shrugged. "Yes, 'tis true, Warburton. I would give all in my power to undo that night's work." "You cannot expect me to believe that, sir. It rests with you alone whether his name be cleared or not, and you remain silent." "Warburton, Oh, do you think it means nothing to me that John is outcast?" Before the misery in those grey eyes, some of Warburton's severity fell away from him. "Master Richard, I want to think the best I can of you. Master Jack would tell me nothing. Will you not? Can you not explain how it came that you allowed him to bear the blame of your cheat?" Richard shuddered. "There's no explanation, no excuse. I forced it on him, on Jack, my brother, because I was mad for love of Lavinia. Oh, my God, the thought of it is driving me crazed. I thought I could forget, and then I meant him. The sight of him brought it all back to me. Ever since that day I've not known how to live and not shriek the truth to everyone. And I never shall. I never shall." "Tell me, sir," pleaded Warburton, touched in spite of himself. Richard's head sunk into his hands. "The whole scene, it is a nightmare. I think I must have been mad. I scarce knew what I was about. Gently, sir. Remember, I know hardly anything. What induced you to mark the cards?" "That debt to Gundry. My father would not meet it. I had to find the money. I could not face the scandal. I tell you I was mad for Lavinia. I could think of nought else. I ceased to care for John because I thought him in love with her. I could not bear to think of the disgrace which would take her from me. Then that night at Dares I was losing. I knew I could not pay. Gad, but I could see my notes of hand under Millward's elbow growing. Jack had played Millward before me, and he had won. I remember they laughed at him, saying his luck had turned at last, for he always lost at cards. Millward and I played with the same pack that they had used. There was another table, I think. Dare was dicing with Fitzgerald. Someone was playing faro with Jack behind me. I heard Jack say his luck was out again. I heard them laugh, and all the time I was losing. The pin of my cravat fell out on my knee. I think no one saw it. As I picked it up, the thought that I should mark the cards seemed to flash into my mind. Oh, it was despicable, I know. I held the ace of clubs in my hand. I scratched it with that pin in one corner. It was easily done. By degrees I marked all 4, and 3 of the kings. No one noticed, but I was nervous. I dared to do no more. I replaced that pin. Soon I began to win, not very much. Then Tracy Belmanoir came across the room to watch our play. From that moment everything seemed to go awry. It was the beginning of the trouble. Tracy stood behind me watching. I could feel him there like some black moth, hovering. I don't know how long he stayed like that. It seemed hours. I could feel his eyes. I could have shrieked. I'll swear my hands were trembling. Suddenly he moved. I had played the ace of hearts. He said, "One moment," in that soft, sinister voice of his. Millward was surprised. I tried to tell myself that Devil had noticed nothing. The mark on that card was so faint that I could scarce see it myself. I thought it impossible that he, a mere onlooker, should discover it. He stepped forward. I remember he brushed my shoulder. I remember how light caught the diamonds he was wearing. I think my brain was numbed. I could only repeat to myself, "Extravagant devil, extravagant devil," and stare at those winking jewels. Then I thought, he is Lavinia's brother, but I do not like him. I do not like him. Little foolish things like that, and my throat was dry. parched. He bent over the table, stretched out his white hand, turned over the ace, lifted his quizzing glass and stared down at the card. Then he dropped the glass and drew out his snuff-box. It had Aphrodite enamelled on the lid. I remember it so distinctly. I heard Tracy ask Milward to examine the ace. I wanted to spring up and strangle him. I could scarce keep my hands still. Richard paused. He drew his hand across his eyes, shuddering. Milward saw the scratch. He cried out that the cards were marked. Suddenly everyone seemed to be gathered about our table, all talking. Jack had his hand on my shoulder. He and Dare were running through the pack, but all the while I could look at no one but Tracy Andover. He seemed so sinister, so threatening in those black clothes of his. His eyes were almost shut, his face so white, and he was looking at me. He seemed to be reading my very soul. For an instant I thought he knew. I wanted to shout out that he was wrong. I wanted to shriek to him to take his eyes away. Heaven knows what I should have done, but he looked away, at Jack, with that sneering smile on his damned mask of a face. I could have killed him for that smile. I think Jack understood it. He dropped the cards, staring at Tracy. Everyone was watching them. No one looked at me. If they had, they must surely have learnt the truth. But they were hanging on Andover's lips, looking from him to Jack and back again. I remember Fitzgerald dropped his handkerchief. I was absurdly interested in that. I was wondering why he did not pick it up when Andover spoke again.
"And Carstairs' luck turned."
Like that, Warburton, with just that faint questioning in his voice. Before Jack could speak there was an outcry. Dare cried "Shame!" to Andover. They laughed at him as well they might. But I saw them exchanging glances. They were wondering. It was suspicious that Jack should have had that run of luck, and that he should lose as soon as he left that table. Milward, poor silly Milward, gaped at Tracy and stuttered that surely 'twas another pack we had used. I could hardly breathe. Then Andover corrected him. How did he know? No one else remembered or thought of noticing, only he. I can see Jack now, standing there so stiffly with his head thrown up and those blue eyes of his flashing.
"Do I understand you to accuse me, Belmanoir?" he said. Oh, but he was furious.
Tracy never said a word, only his eyes just flickered to my face and away again. Jack's hand was gripping my shoulder hard. I could feel his anger. Dare called out that the suggestion was preposterous, that John should cheat. Tracy asked him if the cards were his. Gad, I can hear his soft, mocking voice now. Dare went purple. You know his way, Warburton. "Opened in your presence on this table," he cried.
"By Carstairs?"
smiled Tracy. It was true. But why should Tracy remember it, and none other? They stared at him, amazed. Dare turned to Jack for corroboration. He nodded. I think he never looked haughtier. You know how fond of Jack Dare was. He tried to bluster it off, tried to get control over the affair. It was to no avail. We were puppets, worked by that devil Belmanoir. One man managing that ghastly scene. He pointed out that only 3 of us had used that pack. Jack, Milward and I. Jack laughed.
"Next you will accuse Dick," he snapped scornfully.
"One of you, certainly," smiled Andover. "Or Milward." Then everyone realised that one of us 3 must have marked the cards. Milward was upset, but no one suspected him. It was Jack or me. As long as I live I shall never forget the horror of those moments. If I were exposed it meant the end of everything between Lavinia and I. I tell you, Warburton, I would have committed any sin at that moment. Nothing would have been too black. I could not bear to lose her. You don't know what she meant to me. "I can guess, sir," said the lawyer gravely. No, no, no one could imagine the depths of my love for her. I think not even Jack. I felt his hand leave my shoulder. The truth had dawned on him. I heard the way the breath hissed between his teeth as he realised. Somehow I got to my feet, clutching at the table, facing him. I don't excuse myself. I know my conduct was beyond words dastardly. I looked across at him, just said his name, as though I could scarce believe my ears. So all those watching thought. But Jack knew better. He knew I was imploring him to save me. He understood all that I was trying to convey to him. For an instant he stared at me. I thought, God forgive me. I prayed that he might take the blame on himself. Then he smiled. Coward though I was, when I saw that hurt, wistful little smile on his lips, I nearly blurted out the whole truth. Not quite. I suppose I was too mean-spirited for that. Jack bowed to the room and again to Dare. He said, "I owe you an apology, sir." Dare sprang forward, catching him by the shoulder, crying out that it could not be true. When Jack laughed, he fell away from him as from the plague, and all of them. My God, to see them drawing away, not looking at Jack, and Jack's face growing paler and harder every moment. All his friends turning their backs to him. Davenant, even Jim Davenant, walked away to the fireplace with Evans. I could not look at Jack, I dared not. I could not go to him, stand by him. I had not the right. I had to leave him there in the middle of the room alone. The awful hurt in his eyes made me writhe. The room was whirling round. I felt sick. I know I fell back into my chair, hiding my face. I hardly cared whether they suspected me or not, but they did not. They knew how great was the love between us, and they were not surprised that I broke down. I heard Andover's soft voice. He was telling some tale to Dare. Oh, they were well bred, those men. They skimmed over the unpleasant little episode, ignored Jack. Jack spoke again. I could guess how bravely he was keeping a proud front. I know word for word what he said. "Mr. Dare, your Grace, gentlemen, my apologies for being the cause of so unpleasant an incident. Pray give me leave." They paid no heed. I heard him walk to the door, heard him open it. I could not look at him. He paused and said just one word. "Dick," quite softly. Heaven knows how I got to him. I know I overturned my chair. That drew Dare's attention. He said, "You are not going, Dick?" I shouted "Yes" at him, and then Jack took my arm, leading me out. And all he said was, "Poor old Dick." He had no word of blame for me. He would not allow me to go back and tell the truth as I would have done. I, Warburton, when Jack called me to him, I could have cried it aloud, but he would not have it. He said, "For Lavinia's sake." Warburton blew his nose violently. His fingers were trembling. "You know what happened afterwards. You know how my father turned Jack out penniless. You know how his friends shunned him. You know my poor mother's grief, and you know that he went away, that we could not find him when my mother died. His last words to me were, 'Make Lavinia happy, and try to forget all this.' Forget it? Heavens, try as I might, I could hear nothing further of him until 2 months ago, when he waylaid me. Then I was half dazed at the suddenness of it. He grasped my hand and laughed. It was so dark I could scarce see him. I only had time to demand his address, and then he was off, galloping away over the heath. I think even then he bore no malice." "He does not now," said Warburton sharply. "But, Master Dick, if all this is true, why do you not even now clear him? Surely—" Richard turned his head slowly. Now I may not drag my wife's name through the mud. By clearing him, I ruin her." Warburton could find nothing to say. Only after some time did he clear his throat and say that he was honoured by Carstairs' confidence. You dwell on the part played by his Grace on that evening. Surely your, shall we say, overwrought imagination magnified it?" Richard was disinterested. "I suppose so. Maybe 'twas his extraordinary personality dominating me. He cannot have pulled the wires as I thought he did. Not even Belmanoir could make me act as I did. But at the time I felt that he was pushing, compelling me to accuse Jack. Oh, doubtless I was mad." Warburton eyed the dejected figure compassionately. Then he seemed to harden himself and to regain some of his lost primness of manner. You are determined not to accept the revenues, sir?" "I have not yet sunk so low, Mr. Warburton." "His lordship leaves Wyncham and all appertaining to it at your disposal. He would be grieved at your refusal." "I will not touch it." The lawyer nodded. "I confess, Mr. Carstairs, I am relieved to hear you say that. It will not be necessary again to communicate with his lordship. I think he does not desire any intercourse with his family. He finds it too painful. But he wished to be remembered to you, sir, also to her ladyship." "Thank you. You could ascertain nothing of his situation? He did not confide in you?" "He was very reticent, sir. I think he is not unhappy." "And not embittered?" "Certainly not that, sir." Mr. Warburton rose, plainly anxious to be gone. Reluctantly Richard followed his example. "You have nothing further to tell me of him?" "I regret, sir, nothing." Richard went slowly to the door and opened it. "You must allow me to thank you, sir, for your goodness in undertaking what I know must have been a painful task. I am very grateful." Mr. Warburton bowed low. "I beg you will not mention it, sir. Nothing I might do for the Carstairs could be aught but a pleasure." Again he bowed, and the next instant was gone. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, July 2011. Of the Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Chapter 4. Introducing the Lady Lavinia Carstairs. Richard went slowly back to his chair. After a moment he sat down, staring blankly out of the window, his hands loosely clasped on the desk before him. So he remained for a long while, immobile. At last, with the faintest of sighs, he moved and picked up a quill. He dipped it in the ink, and with his other hand drew towards him a sheaf of papers. Presently he was writing steadily. For perhaps 20 minutes the quill travelled to and fro across the pages. Then it paused, and Richard looked up towards the door. It opened to admit Lady Lavinia. She came rustling into the room with her embroidery in her hand. She dropped her husband a mock curtsy and went over to a high-backed armchair, stretching out a dimpled hand to draw it forward. But even as her fingers touched it, she had changed her mind, and fluttered over to the couch, there to seat herself with much swirling of brocades and arrangement of skirts. She then proceeded to occupy herself with her work, plying her needle hurriedly and jerkily. Richard watched her in silence, following each turn of the pretty hand and each movement of her fair head. The silence was evidently not to my lady's taste, for she presently began to beat an impatient tattoo on the floor with one slender foot. Still he said nothing, and she raised her pure china blue eyes to his face. "Why so glum, Dick? Why do you not talk to me?"
Her voice was rather high-pitched and childish, and she had a curious way of ending each sentence with an upward lilt and a long drawn-out accent, very fascinating to listen to. Richard smiled with an obvious effort. "My dear, I crave your pardon. Warburton has just been—" Her face clouded over instantly, and the full-lipped mouth drooped petulantly. "He has seen him."
Oh?
She made the word twice its length and filled it with disinterest. "Yes, Jack will have none of it. He asks me to be his steward and to use Wyncham as I will. He is very generous."
Yes. Oh, yes, Richard. And you will, Richard?
He ignored the question. Warburton, says he's not much changed."
Oh?
Again the long-drawn monosyllable accompanied by a tiny yawn. "He says he does not think Jack bears me ill will." He paused, as if expecting her to speak, but she was absorbed in arranging two flowers, culled from a bowl at her side, at her breast, and took no notice. Carstairs turned his head away wearily. "If it were not for you, my dear, I would tell the truth. I believe I shall go crazed an I do not."
Dick!
She dropped the flowers on the floor and thought no more about them.
Dick!
"Oh, you need have no fear. I do not suppose," bitterly, "that I have the courage to face them all now, after 6 years." Lavinia moved restlessly, brushing her hand along the couch.
You will not do it, Richard? Promise! You will not? I could not bear the disgrace of it. Promise me you will never do it."
"No," he said slowly, not looking at her. "No, I cannot promise that." She sprang to her feet, flinging her embroidery from her carelessly, and waved fierce, agitated little hands.
"That means you will do it! You want to disgrace me! You do not care how you hurt me by holding this threat over my head so cruelly. You—"
"Lavinia, for heaven's sake!" he implored, pushing back his chair. "Calm yourself." He knew she was about to fly into one of her sudden passions, and frowned with acute vexation.
"I will not! Oh, yes, yes, you think me a shrew. I know, but you need not frown on me, sir, for you are worse. No, I will not. Hush! I am a horrid woman, yes, but you are a cheat! A cheat! A cheat!"
Carstairs strode over to her. "Lavinia!"
No, no! Leave me alone! You make me miserable. You refuse me everything that I want most, and then you threaten to disgrace me."
"That is untrue!" cried Richard, goaded into replying. "I will not promise, that is all. What have I refused you that was within my means to give you? God knows you try your best to ruin me."
There! 'Tis I who am to blame. Pray, did you not induce my lord to leave his money to John when you knew he would have willed it all to you, and you had kept silent? You took no thought to me."
"For heaven's sake, Lavinia, be still! You do not know what you are saying." She pressed her hands to her hot cheeks.
"No, I am unreasonable. I know it. But don't tell me so, for I cannot bear it. And don't look reproach at me, Richard. You drive me mad, I tell you."
She was sweeping up and down the room like some caged animal, lashing herself to a worse fury.
"Say something, Richard! Do something! Don't stand there so quietly! Oh, you should have never married me! I displease you, and you make me worse, and you do not see how 'tis that I cannot live without pleasure and money. I am despicable? Yes, yes, but what are you? Oh, why did you tell me you cheated after you had wedded me?"
Angry sobs escaped her. Her handkerchief was in shreds upon the floor. Carstairs turned his back to her, that she might not see how she had contrived to hurt him, and the moment drove her to fresh fury.
"Don't do that! Don't! Don't! You make me worse by your dreadful silence. Oh, if you really loved me—"
"You cannot doubt that!"
he cried, wheeling suddenly round. "You know how I love you, don't you?" He gripped her by the shoulders and swung her to face him. She trembled and gave a sobbing little laugh. As suddenly as it had come, her anger left her. "Oh, yes, yes, you do love me, Dicky." She twined her arms about his neck and shrank closer. "God help me, yes!" he groaned, thrusting her away. "And you care for no one save yourself."
"No, no!"
she cried, pressing up to him again.
"Do not say that, Dick. Indeed, I love you, but I cannot live without gaiety. You know I cannot. Oh, I do not doubt but what I am very selfish. But 'tis the way I am fashioned, and I cannot change my nature. And now I have hurt you, and I did not mean to. I did not mean to."
"My dear, I know you did not. But try to be less a child, I beg of you. You are so uncontrolled, so—"
"I knew you would say that,"
she answered in a dead voice.
"You do not understand me. You expect me to be good and patient and forbearing, and I tell you 'tis not in my nature."
"But, Lavinia, you can control your passions," he said gently.
"No, I cannot. We Belmanoirs, as God made us, so we are, and he made us spendthrift and pleasure-loving and mad." She walked slowly to the door. "But you do not understand, and you try to make me staid and thoughtful and a good mother, when I am dying for life and excitement, and care not that for housewifery."
She opened the door slowly.
"And now my head aches, and you look grave and say 'tis my wicked temper, when I want you to be sorry and to be ready to do anything to comfort me. Why can you not take me to London, when you know how I long to be there, instead of this gloomy house with naught to do, save my child and my needle? I am so tired of it all, so very tired of it all."
She would have left the room then, but he detained her. "Wait, Lavinia. You say you are unhappy." She released the door handle and fluttered her hands expressively.
"Unhappy? No. I am dull. I am ill-tempered. I am discontented. I am aught you please, so do not be sad, Richard. I cannot bear you to be solemn. Oh, why do we quarrel?"
With one of her impulsive movements she was again at his side, with her beautiful face upturned.
"Love me, Richard. Take me to London and never mind an I do squander your money. Say you do not care. Say that nothing matters so long as I am happy. Why do you not say it? Does anything matter? Don't be prudent, Dicky. Be wild, be reckless, be anything rather than grave and old."
Her arms crept up to his coaxingly.
"Take me to London."
Carstairs smoothed the soft hair back from her forehead very tenderly, but his eyes were worried. "My dear, I will take you, but not just yet. There is so much to be done here. If you will wait a little longer—"
"Ah, if I will wait! If I will be patient and good! But I cannot. Oh, you don't understand, Dicky, you don't understand."
"I am sorry, dear. I promise I will take you as soon as possible, and you will stay as long as you please." Her arms fell away.
"I want to go now."
"Dear—"
Very well, very well. We will go presently. Only don't reason with me."
He looked at her concernedly. "You are overwrought, my love, and tired."
"Yes,"
she agreed listlessly.
"Oh, yes. I will go now and rest. Forgive me, Dick."
She kissed her fingertips and extended them to him.
"I will be good one day."
She turned and hurried out of the room and up the stairs, leaving the door open behind her. Richard stayed for a moment, looking round at the signs of her late presence. Mechanically he stooped to pick up her embroidery and the piece of her handkerchief. The 2 flowers were broken off short, and he threw them away. Then he left the room and went out onto the sunny terrace, gazing across the beautiful gardens into the blue distance.
Across the lawn came a child of 4 or 5, waving a grimy hand.
"Father!"
Richard looked down at him and smiled. "Well, John?" The boy climbed up the terrace steps, calling his news all the way.
"'Tis Uncle Andrew, sir. He has rid over to see you, and is coming through the garden to find you."
"Is he? Has he left his horse at the stables?"
"Ay, sir. So I came to tell you."
"Quite right. Will you come with me to meet him?" The little rosy face lighted up with pleasure.
"Oh, may I?"
he cried, and slipped his hand into Richard's. Together they descended the steps and made their way across the lawn.
"I have run away from Betty,"
announced John with some pride.
"There's Uncle Andrew, sir."
He bounded away towards the approaching figure. Lord Andrew Belmanoir was Richard's brother-in-law, brother to the present Duke. He came up with John in his arms and tumbled him to the ground. "Good day, Dick. 'Tis a spoilt child you have here." "Ay, he is but now escaped from his nurse." "Splendid! Come, John, you shall walk with us, and we'll confound fat Betty." He slipped his arm through Richard's as he spoke. "Come, Dick, there's a deal I have to say to you." He grimaced ruefully. The child ran on ahead towards the wood, a great bull mastiff at his heels. "What's to do now?" asked Richard, looking round into the mobile, dissipated countenance. "The devil's in it this time, and no mistake," answered his lordship with a rueful shake of his head. "Debts?" "Lord, yes. I was at Dellaby's last night, and the stakes were high, although I've lost about 3000, counting what I owe Carew, and devil take me and I know where's to come from. His Tracy turns saint and swears he'll see me damned before he hands me another penny. I doubt he means it too." Tracy was the Duke. Richard smiled a little cynically. He had already had to lend his Grace 1,000 guineas to pay off some trifling debt. "He means it right enough. I believe it would puzzle him to find it." "Do you say so? Why, 'tis impossible, man. Tracy was in town scarce a fortnight since, and he had a run of the devil's own luck. I tell you, Dick, I saw him walk off with a cool 5000 one night, and then he denies me a paltry 3. Lord, what a brother! And all with the air of an angel, as if he had never lost at dice. And a homily thrown in. Anyone would think I had cheated instead of— Dick, I'm confoundedly sorry. Damned thoughtless of me. Never thought that— about what I was saying. I'm a fool." For Richard had winced. "You cannot help that," he said, forcing a laugh. "Have done with your apologies and continue." They had come to the stream by now, and crossed the little bridge into the wood. "Oh, there's not much more. 'Tis only that something must be done, for Carew won't wait, and stab me if I'd ask him, the lean-faced scarecrow. So I came to you, Dick." He let go Richard's arm and flung himself down on a fallen tree trunk, regardless of velvet and laces. "You're a good fellow, and you don't lecture a man as Tracy does. Devil take him! And you play high yourself, or you did, though 'tis an age since I saw you win or lose enough to wink at. And after all, you're Lavy's husband, and— oh, damn it all, Dick, 'tis monstrous hard to ask you." Carstairs, leaning against a tree, surveyed the youthful rake amusedly. "Tush, Andrew," he reassured him. "You're welcome to ask, but the Lord knows where I'm to find it. Gad, what a life! Here's Lavinia keeps buying silks, and I don't know what all, and—" "She was ever a spendthrift jade," said Andrew with a mighty frown. Richard laughed at him. "You're a thrifty fellow yourself, of course." Andrew looked round for something to throw at him, and finding nothing, relapsed once more into deepest despondency. "You're in the right of it. We're a worthless lot. 'Tis the old man's blood in us, I doubt not, with a smattering of her Grace. You never knew my mother, did you, Richard? She was French. Lavy's the spit of her. There's Tracy, stab me, but Tracy's the very devil. Have you ever seen a face like his? No, I'll swear you've not. What with his sneering mouth and his green eyes. Oh, 'tis enough to make a fellow go to the dogs to have a brother like it. 'Pon my soul, it is. Ay, you can laugh, but I tell you 'tis serious." "Ay, go on." "Well, next there's Bob. Damn it all, but I'm sorry for Bob. 'Tis a beggarly pittance they give one in the army, and he was never one to pinch and scrape. Well, as I say, there's Bob, and I never see him. But what's it?
But what it's lend me 100, Andy, or the like. And all to buy his mistress some gewgaw. That's what sickens me. Why, Bob's for ever in some scrape with a petticoat. And as for Tracy, gad, how they can! Then there's Lavinia, but I should think you know her by now. And lastly, there's your humble servant. And I tell you, Dick, what with the racing and the cards and the bottle, I shall be a ruined man before you can turn around. And the pother is, I'll never be any different. 'Tis in the blood. So where's the use in trying?" He made a rueful grimace and rose. "Come on, young Rip, we're going back." John, engaged in the task of hunting for tadpoles in the water some yards distant, nodded and ran on. "I fear my lady is indisposed," said Richard hesitantly. "You wish to see her?" Andrew winked knowingly. "Tantrums, eh? Oh, no, I know her. No, I do not care, and I do not see her. 'Tis little enough she cares for me, though she's as thick as thieves with Tracy. Oh, I'll be done." They walked slowly back to the house, Andrew silent for once, twirling his gold-mounted cane. "You shall have the money, of course. When do you want it?" said Richard presently. "'Pon honour, you're a devilish good fellow, Dick. But if 'tis like to put you to any—" "Nonsense. When do you need it?" "I should pay Carew as soon as may be. Markham can wait over if—" "No. Wednesday?" "'Twill do excellently well. Dick, you're a—" "Oh, pshaw! 'Tis not. I want your opinion on a bay mare I bought last week. You'll maybe think her a trifle long in the leg, but she's a fine animal." John had run indoors, and the two men proceeded to the stables alone, Andrew discouraging all the way, recounting for his brother-in-law's benefit the choice morsels of scandal that were circulating town at the moment. That his auditor but attended with half an ear affected him not at all. He never paused for an answer, and in any case was far too good-natured to care if he received none. By the time they had duly inspected the mare and walked back to the house, it was nearly 4 o'clock, and not altogether to Carstairs' surprise, Lavinia was awaiting them on the terrace, clad in a totally different gown, and with her hair freshly arranged and curled. "'Twould appear that Lavinia has recovered," remarked Andrew as they mounted the steps. "She was ever thus, not 2 minutes the same. Well, Lavvy?"
"Well, Andrew?"
She gave him a careless hand to kiss, but smiled sweetly up at her husband.
"My headache is much better,"
she told him.
"and they said that Andrew was come to see you. So I came downstairs."
She turned eagerly to her brother.
"Tell me, Andrew, is Tracy at home?"
"Lord, yes. He arrived yesterday, devil take him. Do you want him?"
"Oh, yes."
She nodded.
"I want to see him again. I've not set eyes on him for an age. I want you to take me back with you."
"Surely, my dear, 'tis a trifle late in the day for such a drive," demurred Richard, trying to conceal his annoyance. "Can you not wait until to-morrow?" "Faith, you'll have to, Lavvy, for I'll not take you to-day. That's certain. I'm riding to Fletcher's when I leave here. Tracy can visit you to-morrow an he chooses."
"Will he?"
she asked doubtfully. Andrew clapped his hand to his vest pocket. "If I had not forgot!" he exclaimed. "I've a letter from him for you. He intends waiting on you to-morrow. In any case, Lord, what it is to have a scatterbrain like mine!" He pulled a handful of papers from his pocket and selected one, sealed and addressed in a sloping Italian handwriting. Lavinia pounced upon it joyfully and tore it open. Andrew restored the rest of the documents to his pocket with yet another rueful laugh. "Duns, Richard, duns." "Give them to me," answered the other, holding out his hand. "Oh, no! But many thanks, Dick. These are quite unimportant." "Why not pay them all and start afresh?" urged Carstairs. "Lord, no! Why, I should be so damned elated that before the day was out there'd be a score of fresh debts staring me in the face." "Let me lend you 1,000 to begin on. Could you not keep out of debt?" "I keep out of debt? Impossible! Don't look so solemn, Dick. I told you 'twas in the blood. We never have a penny to bless ourselves with. But what's the odds? I shall have a run of luck soon. A man can't always lose. Then I shall be able to pay you. But of course I shan't. It'll all go at the next table, I know." He spoke so ingenuously that Richard could not be angry with him. There was a certain frankness about him that pleased, and though he might be spendthrift and heedless, and colossally selfish, Richard felt a genuine affection for him. He would have liked to argue the point further, but Lavinia came forward, refolding her letter.
"Tracy is coming to-morrow afternoon," she told her husband. "'Twill be prodigiously agreeable, will it not?"
He assented, but with a lack of warmth that did not fail to strike her ears.
"And he will stay to dine with us?"
she cried challengingly. "Certainly, my love."
"Look pleased, Dicky, look pleased. Why don't you like Tracy? He is my brother. You must like him."
"Of course I like him, Lavinia. Pray do not be foolish."
"Oh, I am not. Don't be cross, Dicky dear."
"Well, if you like him, I'm surprised," broke in Andrew. "I can't bear him. Ay, flash your eyes at me, Lavvy, I don't mind." Lavinia opened her mouth to retaliate, but Richard hastily interposed. Their bickering was more than he could bear, and he never understood how Lavinia could stoop to quarrel with the boisterous youth who tried so palpably to rouse her. He bore them back off to the house, feeling much like a nursemaid with two recalcitrant children. End of Chapter 4. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, July 2011. Of the Black Moth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tara Mendoza. The Black Moth by Georgette Heyer. Chapter 5. His Grace of Andover. Lady Lavinia dressed herself with even more than her usual care next afternoon, and well-nigh drove her maid distracted by her flashes of temper and impatient, contradictory orders. So lengthy was the toilette that she was only just in her boudoir when his Grace of Andover was announced. She had no time to tell the footman that she would receive his Grace, for almost before the words were out of James's mouth he stood bowing in the doorway, sure of his welcome. He was curiously like his sister, this man, and at the same time curiously unlike. Hers were the high cheekbones and pinched aristocratic nostrils, but the mouth with its thin lips and the heavy-lidded green eyes were totally different. His Grace's brows slanted up at the corners, and his eyes, though piercing and bright, were constantly veiled by the black-lashed lids. He wore his own black hair unpowdered, and that, together with the black and silver garments that he always affected, greatly enhanced the natural pallor of his countenance. Altogether it was a very striking figure that stood just before the closed white door and bowed to my lady. Lavinia took an eager step towards him, swinging her pearl grey brocades.
"Oh, Tracy!"
she cooed, holding out both hands. His Grace advanced into the room and bent low over them. "I rejoice to find you within, Lavinia," he said, a faint tinge of sarcasm running through his smooth tones. "As you perceive, I rode over." He made a gesture towards his high boots with their wicked-looking spurs. "No doubt Andrew forgot to give you my letter?"
"No,"
she said, slipping her hand in his arm.
"He remembered in time, and oh, Tracy, I was so vastly delighted to have it."
"I am indeed honoured," he replied. "I am come on a sufficiently important matter."
"Oh?"
She pulled her hand away disappointedly.
"Money?"
"You are really wonderful, my dear, as you so crudely remark. Money. Will you not be seated?" She sank down on the couch dejectedly and watched him take a chair opposite her. "Your most noble lord and master lent me a trifling sum the other day, but very trifling. I am, as usual, hard-pressed, and that young fool Andrew must needs fall into debt." Milady opened wide her eyes in surprise.
"Do you tell me you need money from Richard to pay Andrew's debts?"
she asked frankly, incredulous. "I do not. Is it likely?" The remark was purely by the way.
"Well, in any case, Andrew borrowed 3,000 from poor Dick only yesterday. I know, because I heard him speak of it."
His Grace raised his black brows in patient exasperation. "How unnecessary of Andrew, and how typical! So poor Dick has been squeezed already?"
"Don't speak like that, Tracy," she cried. "Dicky is good to me." She met his piercing look unflinchingly. "Now this becomes interesting," drawled the Duke. "Since when have you come to that conclusion? And why this sudden loyalty?" "I have always been loyal to him, Tracy. You know I have. I worry him, and indeed he is very forbearing."
"But how charming of him!"
"No, do not sneer, Tracy. He has promised to take me to London for the whole winter."
His Grace leant back in his chair again. "Now I understand," he said placidly. "I was at a loss before."
"'Tis not that, Tracy. Indeed, I realise how kind he is to me, and we have quarrelled again. We are always quarrelling, and I know 'tis all my fault."
"What a comfortable conviction, my dear."
"No, no, 'tis not comfortable, Tracy, for somehow I cannot change my disposition, though I mean to be patient and sweet. Tracy, I hate Wyncham."
"You hate Wyncham? There was a time—"
I know, but I never meant to live here always like this. I want to go to London."
"I thought you said you were going."
"Yes, I am, but I want to go with someone who is gay, not—
In fact, you want distraction, and not with the amiable Richard? Well, I can conceive that life with him might prove uninspiring. Safe, my dear, but not exciting."
I knew you would understand. You see, he does not like me to play at cards, because I cannot stop, and he cannot see how 'tis that I care not for what he calls home life, when there are routs in the play and real life. He is so staid, Tracy, and careful."
"A good trait in a husband, Lavinia," replied his Grace cynically. "'Tis because I do not possess it that I am single now." His lips curled scornfully at this, for well she knew her brother.
"No, Tracy, that is not so. It is because you are the devil. No woman would marry you."
"That is most interesting, my dear," purred his Grace. "But pray strive to be a little more original. Continue your analysis of Richard's sterling character."
"'Tis only that we are so different." She sighed. "I always desire to do things quickly. If I think of something, I want it at once, you know, Tracy. And he likes to wait and think on it, and oh, 'tis so tiresome, and it puts me in a bad humour, and I behave like a hysterical bourgeois." She got up swiftly, clasping her nervous little hands. "When he speaks to me in that gentle, reasoning way, I could scream, Tracy. Do you think I am mad?"
She laughed unmusically. "No," he replied, "but the next thing to it, a belle manoir. Perhaps it was a pity you ever married Richard, but there is always the money."
"There is not!"
she cried out sharply. "Not? What mean you?"
"Tracy, 'tis of this that I wanted to speak. You think my lord left his money to Dick?"
"Certainly. He should be stupendously wealthy."
"He is not."
"But, my good girl, the revenue must be enormous. He has the land, surely?"
No, he has not the land. Oh, but I am angry whenever I think on it. He induced my lord to leave it to John. He has but his younger son's portion."
"I still fail to understand. You informed me that the Earl left all to Richard."
"He changed his will, Tracy."
"He changed his will? Then, my dear, you must have played your cards very badly."
"'Twas not my fault, Tracy, indeed 'twas not. I knew not until the will was read. Richard never spoke a word to me about it, and now we are comparatively poor."
Her voice trembled with indignation, but his Grace only whistled beneath his breath. "I always knew, of course, that Dick was a fool, but I never guessed how much so till now." At that she flared up.
"He is not a fool. He is an honest man, and 'tis we, I tell you, who are mean and despicable and mercenary."
"Undoubtedly, Lavinia, but pray do not excite yourself so over it. I suppose he is still devoted to that young hothead?"
Yes, 'tis all Jack, 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 until I am sick to death of the sound of his name. And—" she broke off, biting her lip. "And what?" "Oh, naught. But 'tis all so disagreeable, Tracy." She stamped angrily. "Oh, where's the good in being flippant?" "My dear Lavinia, where's the good in being anything else? The situation strikes me as rather amusing. To think of the worthy Richard so neatly overturning all my plans." "If it had not been for you, I might never have married him. Why did you throw them both in my way? Why did I ever set my eyes on either of them?"
"It should have been a good match, my dear, and if I remember rightly, no one was more alive to that fact than yourself." She pouted angrily and turned her shoulder to him. "Still," he continued reflectively, "I admit that for the smart lot we are, we do seem rather to have bungled the affair." Lavinia swept round upon him.
"Oh, do you care no more than that? How can you be so casual? Does it affect you not at all?"
He wrinkled his thin nose expressively. "I shall not weep over it, Lavinia, but 'tis a plaguey nuisance. But we must see what can be done, and that brings me back to the original subject. Despite these upsetting revelations, I still require that money."
"Oh dear! How much must you have, Tracy?"
500 might suffice."
"Tracy, do not the estates bring in anything?" she asked petulantly. "And Andrew told us you had a run of marvellous luck not a fortnight since."
"Since then, my dear, I have had 3 runs of marvellous ill luck. As to the estates, they are mortgaged up to the hilt, as you very well know. What little there is between 3, and Robert is extravagant."
"I hate Robert."
"I am not partial to him myself, but it makes no odds."
"I wish he might die." "Oh, no, no! Now I am become ill-natured again. I don't wish it, only I am so tired of everything. You shall have that money as soon as possible, but be careful, Tracy, please be careful. 'Tis not easy to get money from Dick."
"No, I should imagine not. However, we have managed rather well up to the present. Take it all in all."
"Up to the present he has had all the money he wanted. My lord denied him not."
"Well, 'tis unfortunate, as I said before, but it must be endured. Where is Dick?"
"I know not. You will stay to dinner, Tracy?"
"Thank you. I shall be charmed."
"Yes, yes. Oh, how prodigiously pleasant it is to see you again. Soon I shall come to Andover. Will you let me stay a few days?"
"The question is, will Richard allow you to stay so long in my contaminating presence?"
"Richard would never keep me away, Tracy," she replied proudly. "He could not. Oh, why is it that I don't love him more? Why do I not care for him as much as I care for you even?"
"My dear Lavinia, like all Belmanoirs, you care first for yourself and secondly for the man who masters you. That, alas, Richard has not yet succeeded in doing."
"But I do love Richard. I do, yet—"
"Exactly. Yet. The grand passion has not yet touched you, my dear, and you are quite self-absorbed."
"Self-absorbed? Those are hard words."
"But not too hard for the case. You think solely of yourself, your own pleasure, your own character, your own feelings. If you could cast yourself into the background a little, you would be less excitable and considerably less discontented."
"How dare you, Tracy? Pray, what of you? Are you so selfless?"
"Not at all. I am precisely the same. I was merely suggesting that you might be happier and you could depose self."
"You had best do the same yourself."
"My dear Lavinia, when I feel the need of greater happiness, I most undoubtedly shall. At present I am quite content."
"You are unkind," she protested, "and you sneer at me."
"Pray accept my heartfelt apologies. You shall come to Andover if the worthy Richard permits." Her face cleared as by magic.
"Oh, Tracy! Oh, I'm so desirous to be gay once more. I cannot even receive now on account of this mourning. But when I am at Andover, oh, we will not worry over anything, and I can be bad-tempered without feeling that someone is being hurt by me. I'll come to Dicky at once, at once."
He rose leisurely. "I can imagine that you try Richard's patience somewhat," he remarked. "Happily, your impetuosity in no way disturbs me. We will go in search of Richard." Half-way down the great staircase she perceived her husband, and flew to meet him.
"Richard, I was coming in search of you. Tracy has invited me to Andover for a week. He purposes to ask several people to stay, and there will be parties and entertainment. You will let me go? Say yes, Dick. Say yes quickly."
Carstairs bowed to his Grace, who stood watching them from the stairs. The bow was returned with exaggerated flourish. Carstairs looked down at his wife. "So soon, Lavinia?" he remonstrated, in indicating her mourning. She shook off his hand impatiently.
"Oh, Dickie, does it matter? What can it signify? I do not ask you to come."
"No," he said, half sadly, half amusedly. "I noticed that, my dear."
"No, no, I did not mean to be unkind. You must not think that. You don't think it, do you, Dick?"
"Oh, no," he sighed.
"Good, Dickie."
She patted his cheek coaxingly.
"Then you will allow me to go? Ah, but yes, yes, you must listen. You know how dull I am, and how silly. 'Tis because I need a change, and I want to go to Andover. I want to go."
"Yes, dear, I know. But my father is not yet dead 6 weeks, and I cannot think it seemly."
"Please, Dick, please! Please do not say no. 'Twill make me so unhappy. Oh, you will not be so unkind? You will not forbid me to go?"
"I ask you not to, Lavinia. If you need a change, I will take you quietly to Bath, or where you will. Do not pain me by going to Andover just now."
"Bath? Bath? What do I want with Bath at this time of year? Oh, 'tis kind in you to offer, but I want to go to Andover. I want to see all the old friends again, and I want to get away from everything here. 'Tis all so gloomy after my lord's death."
"Dearest, of course you shall go away. But if only you would remember that you are in mourning."
"But 'tis what I wish to forget. Oh, Dickie, don't be unkind."
"Very well, dear. If you must go, go." She clapped her hands joyfully.
"Oh, thank you, Dickie. You are not angry with me?"
"No, dear, of course not."
"Ah, now I am happy. 'Tis sweet of you, Dickie, but confess you are secretly thankful to be rid of me for a week. Now are you not?"
She spread out her fan in the highest good humour, and coquetted behind it. Richard was induced to smile. "I fear I shall miss you too sadly, dear."
"Oh!"
She dropped the fan.
"But think how you will look forward to seeing me again, and I you. Why, I shall be so thankful to be back after a week away that I shall be good for months."
His face lightened, and he caught her hands in his. "Darling, if I thought you would miss me—"
"But of course I shall miss you, Dick. Oh, pray mind my frock. Shall I not miss him, Tracy?"
Richard suddenly remembered his brother-in-law's presence. He turned and went to the foot of the stairs. "So you are determined to wrest my wife from me?" he smiled. Tracy descended leisurely, opening his snuff-box. "Yes, I require a hostess," he said, "and I have," he paused, "induced her to honour Andover with her presence. Shall we have the felicity of seeing you at any time?" "I thank you, no. I am not, you will understand, in the mood for the gaiety for which my poor Lavinia craves." The Duke bowed slightly, and they all three went out on to the terrace, Lavinia laughing and talking as Richard had not heard her laugh or talk for days. She was the life and soul of the little dinner party, flirting prettily with her husband, and exerting herself to please him in every way. She had won her point. Therefore she was in excellent spirits with all the world, and not even the spilling of some wine on her new silk served to discompose her. End of Chapter 5. Recording by Tara Mendoza. Phoenix, Arizona, July 2011.